Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 363, and I had a conversation with George Gallo, the one and only. George is a producer, screenwriter, and director. Think of Bad Boys, Middlemen, one of my personal favorites, Midnight Run, and dozens of other films. He's also an impressionist painter, an exceptional one, I might add, and he's a musician. I interviewed George twice, once in 2021 and again recently in 2023. The first time was in anticipation of a film that he did called The Comeback Trail, but it was plagued by distribution issues, and so I was waiting for the film to come out in America, and I thought, I'll just wait for that, right before that to put out the show, and just all this stuff happened, so didn't end up doing that. And I contacted him. I said, hey, do you mind if we talk again? Because there's more questions I have. I want to dig in a little deeper. And he's so kind with his time and said yes. And the second time we chatted, it was great. We talked about philosophy and art and music and really dug in. We even talked about his love story with his wife, Julie. And I love that because I love asking people about their love stories. Anyway, I think you're going to dig this one. I am delighted by George. He and I actually have a lot in common with the different things that draw our artistic desires and what sparks us. So I had a blast chatting with him. Okay, check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn about my guests in the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. You can find my records, records, albums, CDs, whatever you want to call it, downloads on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. Look for my most recent record, All I Ever Wanted Was Everything, but there's others too, Surfacing to Breathe, How to Say Goodbye, there's an EP, there's all sorts of stuff. Check out my relationships and sex show with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman. That's on YouTube under Are We There Yet? Podcast show. And rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes, Spotify, really anywhere you get your podcasts. It's probably there. Check it out, rate it, and review it. It's very helpful, and I appreciate it. All right. Thank you for listening. Be well, be kind, be love, and bloom where you're planted. Yeah? All right. Here we go. George Gallo, welcome to Hey Human.
Hey, good to be here. Do you like to be called Susan or Susie, or what do you like? What do I call
Susan.
you?
I like to be called. Yeah, that's my preference.
Okay,
sure.
You got it, Susan.
Thank you. I never felt like a Sue or a Susie, and I barely feel like a Susan. So
that's interesting because I obviously my name is George my whole life, but I never really related to that either. Like that's the name they get. I'm a junior. That was my father's name. So.
That's it. I always wonder about that with juniors and thirds and fourths, if there's an identity loss in that at all.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know, maybe perhaps to some degree, but that happens a lot in Italian families. They get the dad's name. I know Jews skip a generation, right? Mm-hmm. But Italians, they don't do that. So there were a lot of juniors in my family.
Yeah, the Jews are not supposed to name anyone after anyone that is still living.
Still living, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Yeah, which is,
yes.
There are workarounds. For example, my name Susan means Lily of God in Hebrew. And so if I were to have a daughter, I could name her Lily, and it's like naming her Susan, but not.
Got it.
So within the Jewish tradition, you'll find a lot of Susan Lilies as they go down the line.
Well, my father came from a family of 13 kids.
Whoa.
So yeah, they were busy, those Italians. But my father was the second youngest kid. And I think they'd run out of names because all the names were Italian. And George is not really an Italian name. And my father was born very close to, I think it was Abraham Lincoln. I think he was born like within a day or two of Abraham Lincoln's birthday. And so my grandfather, Vito, that's a very Italian name, wanted to name my father Abraham. But I think my grandmother said, no way. So then George for George Washington. And so that's because that was a few days also within. And so that's how I ended up with George. But
my father's middle name is Abraham, actually.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Abraham's a beautiful name. I guess in an Italian family, Abraham Gallo. That's an interesting name.
That is.
It's sort of like Quentin Tarantino. Like Quentin is not really an Italian name that I'm aware of.
I always wondered is that his real name or is that a stage?
It sure sounds like a stage name. And,
yeah, it does.
And if not, he was destined for stardom.
Yeah. I have not to go too far off track, but
well, go ahead.
A friend of mine somehow accidentally got won tickets, and within the tickets were these invitations to, I believe it was a Golden Globes. Somehow it got mixed in. It was probably meant for someone else, and so he went with a friend of his to this thing, and they're sitting at the table trying not to have any attention beyond them because they're eating their chicken or whatever, just trying to lay low. And this man came up and sat down and started chatting with them, and he said, "Hey, and he had a script on him apparently, and he gave them to read the Kill Bill script. It was Quentin Tarantino. I want to know what they thought." So it was very surreal.
That's hysterical.
Yeah, and they said he was very nice, very chatty, and pretty wild.
Yeah, he lives up the street from me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't see him very often, but
Well, okay, let's get into you.
All right, what do you want to know?
How many siblings did you have?
Just me. I'm an only child.
Whoa! Did your parents have to sign a contract with the Pope to?
Well, my father got married very late in life, and so did my mother. So I think they barely squeezed one out.
Yeah, because that's very common in a Catholic family. I'm assuming you're Catholic.
Yeah. No, but like I say, my dad basically lived through the Depression and then fought in the Second World War. By the time he got back, I think he was in his late 30s already. And he didn't get married until somewhere in his early 40s. And then my mom was also, I think, mid 30s when she had me, which is very late back then, mid to late 30s. So, yeah.
Yeah, practically an old maid, for God's sake.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and I'm half German. Can't tell from the radio, obviously, but I'm very tall. And so the height came from my mom's side of the family.
Interesting. Did your father, was he very present, or did the being in the war, and what a war, did that distance him from the family at all?
No. I mean, it's very interesting in that in my family in particular, most of them didn't have kids. It's really interesting. Aunt Laura, my father's sister had one kid, but my Uncle Frank fought in the war, so he didn't get back till late. Aunt Laura and Dominic was also in the Navy. So, and then he stayed till a few years after the war. By the time he came back, they didn't have kids. My Aunt Rose was in love with a pilot who died during the war. And so she never got married after that. She felt loyal to him. And she lived to be like in her 90s, and she lived alone. And I asked her a couple of times, and she said, "No, my heart belonged to that man." And that was it.
Oh, God, it breaks my heart.
Yeah. So a lot of people in my family did not have children.
Do you have kids?
No. And I don't have any war stories either. We just didn't have kids.
Yeah.
No. I have a few war stories with her, but
that's Julie in the background, for everybody wondering.
No, it just never happened, and we were, I don't know, we just, maybe we're maybe too much for children ourselves, but
animals,
but we've saved maybe thousands of animals.
And how are the cats doing with the 4th of July fireworks?
Well, we only have one kitty cat right now, the great Princess Sophie Renee.
Oh,
and I'm sorry, we had 8 at one point.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we were saving everything in the neighborhood. The word got out. You feed one cat and then you let them in, then the word gets out all over the neighborhood. It's suddenly they say, "Hey, go up to that house over there. They'll feed you. They'll take you in."
Yeah. So, there's a top cat that's getting the word out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you remember that cartoon, Top Cat?
Top Cat, yes. The indisputable leader of the gang, right?
Yeah.
He's an
it had a great song.
Most tip-top Top Cat.
Yeah. Great song. That's an oldie. Yeah. Childhood was good then? You grew up on the East Coast?
Yeah, East Coast. Yeah, Port Chester, New York, Westchester County. My father was from the Bronx, so he moved up to Port Chester, where he met my mom. And grew up in Westchester County in Portchester, which was sort of an interesting. It's sort of Westchester County is a wealthy county, but Portchester was sort of a very working class place with a lot of factories. So it was in between two very wealthy towns, but Portchester itself was a little more, certainly a working class place. It was a great childhood. I mean, I have a lot of fond memories of it. If I go back, I haven't been back now in about 5 years, but I get choked up, when I walk around those old streets,
It's also quite beautiful.
For me, look, I love the East Coast. I just do. Where are you right now?
I'm in Los Angeles.
You are. Well, me too. I sometimes miss it tremendously, like a big hole in my heart almost for it. It's so beautiful. I love the seasons. I love what they do to your body. I love the feeling of springtime and your body reawakening, and then going through the summer, and then you feel the fall coming, and then you feel like the earth going back to sleep, and then you have the winter, which is wonderful. And I love, the cold, and I just, all those changes, I really love them because you feel a lot more connected to the earth in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not putting down LA, but it's basically 78 degrees all the time and sunny, which I guess is not a terrible thing, especially if you like to be outdoors and play golf or tennis or whatever you're doing. But I do miss those smells too. If you're from the East, the way the spring used to smell when all the buds started to pop, and the autumn had that wonderful just smell to it. And I don't know, it's pretty special.
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, so I get the whole idea of the smells related to seasons.
Where in the Pacific Northwest?
Seattle, basically Seattle.
Yeah, Seattle's pretty. Yeah. I like Seattle a lot. And then we went to a place called Whidbey Island.
Yeah.
We have a friend of ours had a place there, and just wonderful. We walked along the water all the time. There were these jets flying over, landing all the time. There's some sort of air base there or something.
Yeah, there's a naval base in Whidbey Island.
Yeah. Be quiet for about 10 minutes, and somebody would come screaming over your head.
Yeah. There's a lot of little islands that go all around the sound, and really lovely, really beautiful. And of course, Pacific Northwest got a rainforest and lots of great pine trees and evergreens.
Oh, no, it's gorgeous. I'm also a landscape painter, so I love being in nature, just quiet with a paintbrush. That's really my true love, That's what you started in the creative arts. That was your beginnings? Yeah, that was it. Started out painting, and then, it's funny, I was doing everything at once. I was also playing like every musical instrument I could get my hands on. I was making movies with a Super 8 camera and a 16 millimeter camera. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I was doing everything at once. And, and then I guess the movie sort of took over because I love the idea of comedy and drama, and it is a visual medium, so I could use whatever I knew about music and visuals in order to make movies.
Well, I think all those art forms are storytelling art forms. I tell people I'm a painter as well and a songwriter.
Are you?
Yeah. And I always say all of it is storytelling.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Yes, you are 100% correct.
And you're an impressionist?
Yeah, I would say I'm an impressionist. Yeah, it's certainly. I studied with a Russian teacher. I was his apprentice for a few years, and he was one of those real hardcore Russian impressionists. Studied in Moscow, Eastern Europe, and there's something I love about that directness. Just the paint and to me, it's breathtaking, and to do so much with like an economy of means, it's not labored painting. It's more reactionary painting, so that's what I love about it.
And oil it's a lesson in patience as well. If you were taught by a Russian, I assume you're doing oils.
Yeah, they're all oils. Yeah. Probably is my favorite thing to do, because with painting, it is final in that I don't need to get a permission from anyone. Hey, I'm going to put some blue over here. Is that okay with the committee? And you could just work at the speed of thought. The That's the fun part of painting for me. Whereas a movie, you can have an idea, and 10 years down the road, you're still hoping it gets made. Sometimes it's hard to grow as a filmmaker if you're always stymied. If you want to do something really, really bad. I mean, like with the movie I just did, Josh and I wrote that screenplay a dozen years ago. And, then when it started to come back to life, you almost forget why you wanted to make it in the first place. I mean,
are you talking about the comeback trail?
Yeah, because it comes back to you eventually, and then you get reignited, you get excited. But, it was something. I mean, the whole history of the comeback trail is sort of crazy in that it goes back to my high school days, actually, where the idea first sort of came to me. The comeback trail happened because I was making movies already when I was 18, and with a Super 8 cam. It was a GAF 805 sound camera. I still remember it. I used to buy the Kodachrome 40 in the little black case, and you'd flip open the case and you'd put it in and close the case. And it had a little microphone, and you could actually record sound. And I would talk all my friends into making these movies with me. Yeah. So anyway, a bunch of buddies, those same guys I was making movies with, we went to a comic book convention in New York City at a hotel. And I ended up leaving the convention, and I was wandering around the lobby of the hotel, and I heard a 16 millimeter projector rattling away in a conference room. And I opened the door, and there were like about, I don't know, I'd say about a dozen people in the room. And there was a bunch of folding chairs. So I, of course, invited myself in, and nobody stopped me. And I sat and I was watching the 16 millimeter print of an unfinished movie, and it still had all the splice marks in it and everything, and raw sound. And it was a movie called The Comeback Trail with Buster Crabbe and Chuck McCann. And there was a guy there by the name of Harry Hurwitz who had made the movie, but they were just looking at pieces of the movie. They never really finished it. And the movie was pretty crude. And I mean, and the people involved in it certainly would admit to that. They were making it on a shoestring. But the idea that they were trying to kill an actor in a stunt to collect the insurance, I just thought was hysterical. And I never forgot that idea, and I thought about it for years. And then I moved to Los Angeles, and I started selling screenplays, and I started to get a career as a writer and then as a writer-director. And for years, I tried to find the rights to The Comeback Trail, and I could never find them because the movie was officially never released. And I would have lawyers looking into it, and they'd say, well, they could track it only so far. But Harry Hurwitz had passed away. So I was just didn't know what to do. And then my assistant, at the time was my assistant, became my writing partner. Josh came to work for me, Josh Posner. And then I would always, every once in a while, I'd bring up The Comeback Trail and how I really wanted to make this movie. And to the point where I think he was like, maybe you ought to stop thinking about this because it's just one of those crazy things that's just going to haunt you to your grave. It's never going to happen. And then by chance, 15 years ago, I was asked to there was a screening of Midnight Run at Phil Rosenthal's house, and I was asked to speak at it. So it was great. Phil had this beautiful screening room in his house. They have all these people over and serve pizza to everybody. And so I became part of that film group, and they ran movies, and I would go watch them once in a while. But like I said, I was going to speak after Midnight Run was over. And as I was going in, there were maybe about 50, 60 people there. As I was going in, this lovely woman comes up to me and says, are you George Gallo? And I said, yeah. And she said, I just want to let you know, this was my husband's favorite movie. And I said, that's so sweet. Thank you. And I said, what's your name? And she said, Joy Hurwitz. And I said, are you any relation to Harry Hurwitz? And she said, Harry was my husband. And I was like, oh my God. I said, I want to talk to you about this movie he did called The Comeback Trail. And she went, The Comeback Trail? How do you know about that? Like 12 people saw that movie. It was never released. And I told her the story I just told you. I said, I saw a very early cut of it. And I said, I've always wanted to take that idea and remake that movie. And she said, so I said to her, who owns the rights? And she said, I do. And I said, okay, do you want to partner up with me? And she said, sure, partner. So that was 15 years ago.
Whoa. Talk
So
about
then,
divine intervention.
I know, really is. And then, so Josh and I wrote various drafts of it, and it made us laugh, and it made my wife laugh. But you never know, like, are you, does your wife just think it's funny because it's you, and she already knows you're an idiot, so she's just laughing at your jokes? And then Josh is Josh so emotionally invested in it that he just thinks it's funny because he co-wrote. But I would give it to friends, and they'd say, George, this is hysterical. And they'd all say the same thing. You're never going to get it made, though, because it's a movie about Hollywood. It's a movie about making a movie. It's a movie about producers. Of all things, they're making a Western, and nobody makes Westerns anymore. So it's just check the boxes of all the reasons why no one's ever going to make it. And I was thinking, yeah, but how about all the reasons? Maybe all in one movie makes it unique, because, you wouldn't, do 12 things wrong. But anyway, I gave it, like I said, I tried to go the normal studio route. And same thing. Couldn't stop laughing, pass. So it was very, very frustrating. And then again, divine intervention. This movie was obviously, destined to happen. Robert De Niro calls me up, and we talk from time to time, but sometimes we talk a lot, and then sometimes we don't talk for a few years. But he called me up out of the blue, and he said, Georgie, it's Bob. I went, hey, Bob, what a surprise, And he said, do you have anything funny? And I said, yeah, well, why do you ask? He goes, well, I just did The Irishman, and I played this sort of dark psychopath for 8 months, and I got to cleanse the palate. I got to do something like really just silly. And I says, man, I've got something that's almost like Three Stooges silly. And he said, send it to me. So I sent it to him, and 2 days later, he called me back. He goes, this is hysterical. How come nobody's making this? I said, man, I don't know. I said, do you want to do it with me? And he goes, I'm in. And that was how it got made. And after that, I called Morgan Freeman, who I knew very well because I did 2 movies with him. And then I called, Bob called Tommy Lee Jones because they know each other. And that's sort of how it happened.
When you have screenwriters who have a huge track record, I mean, your CV is long, and that until a big name is attached to it, it still doesn't matter. That just blows my mind.
No, it doesn't matter. And it's really, really amazing. It doesn't matter. It might get me in the door in that people love Midnight Run or Bad Boys or, some of the movies that I've done, that I've written. So people always say they're excited to read. But really, until there's a big piece of talent attached, unless it's something so of that moment, the way a lot of studios work is they don't really, it's not the way it used to be, and I've been around decades now doing this. When I started, thankfully, the studios were always interested in give me the new idea. Give me the new idea. Pitch me something new. Pitch me something new. And for me, that was like music to my ears. So like the Midnight Run or Wise Guys or Bad Boys, those were all ideas that I came up with, and today that's much more difficult. Now it's like they want something that was based on a hit movie, that was also based on a hit TV show, that was based on a hit novel, that was based on a hit idea, that was a huge hit in China or Asia or India. They don't want anything new. They're not interested in it. Or based on comic books, which have millions of eyeballs. This idea of the idea of the original screenplay, has gone the way of the I would say of the blacksmith and the you name it. Think of some 18th century invention, the cotton gin. I don't know. Wherever. It's really, there's just very little interest in it now.
I don't understand. Regurgitation politic is so bizarre to me, and what a loss! What a great loss for art in general.
Yes, I understand both sides of it. I understand on a commercial level, but here's already the problem in my first sentence. I understand if you want to spend $250 million just to make something, and then an additional $250 to $350, $400 million to market it, you're in for $700 million. And you better hope that somebody knows what this thing is. I think, so obviously, they want to maximize profits. Part of the problem for me is, other than these giant tentpole movies, I don't know why movies really cost that much money. It's sort of crazy to me.
Yeah.
I mean, you could take over countries with this money, and it's like, it's so nuts to me you're in for $700, $800 million to make a movie that goes by in 90 minutes. It's so crazy to me. You can make amazing cinema for like 1% of that money.
Yeah, I always talk about the movie Tangerine, which I thought was a fantastic movie, and it was shot on an iPhone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's why I love Steven Soderbergh, what he's doing now. He's shooting things on iPhones and I think, look, a lot of it is because I'm older. I'm 65 years old. I grew up in the 70s when there was that whole new Hollywood resurgence going on. And you had all those amazing filmmakers. You had Scorsese was a kid starting out, and George Lucas. This is all pre-Star Wars too, and Spielberg, and you had just done Sugarland Express, and Jaws started to change things in 1975. But you had Peter Bogdanovich, William Friedkin, who I just think, The Exorcist and The French Connection. I just watched them last week, both of them. It doesn't get any better than that. These were real movies. Yeah. These were real movies, and they were commercial, and then they were sort of anti-commercial at the same time, which was part of their appeal. Cinema for me always had this kind of, semi-underground, hip, cool thing about it. It was cutting edge. It wasn't like, it was supposed to shake you up and be different. It was supposed to slap you around a little bit, make you think, make you feel things, even confuse you, confound you. It wasn't a lot of pablum to me, which is what a lot of it's turned into. So I'm a bit of I am a throwback, and that I much prefer making those kinds of movies. The problem is, I think a lot of people today, unless they either are my age or have a tremendous love of movies and cinema, don't get the references today. When they see a smaller movie, they go, this is cheap, this is shit, as opposed to, wow, this is a cool, different little movie these people put together. But if you don't understand, look, if you were starting out today, I don't see how any of these people, like if you think about Robert Altman or Scorsese or any one of those guys, if they were starting out today, I don't know if they would get the reception today that they got then. These were guys in their cellars, trying to make something different. And
also,
today,
they believed in space. I say this a lot, that there was a time when movies really took advantage of time, of space and time, and the feel of a suspenseful moment, or of walking to a telephone to take a call, or any of that stuff was all part of the dynamic of what people were seeing. And it really brought you in, and now it's just boom, 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 boom.
To me, it's maddening. Like I just did a little action movie called Vanquish with Ruby Rose and Morgan Freeman, and the whole opening, I took my sweet ass time because I'm trying to lure you in. Now, if you have attention deficit syndrome, then you get. I think people see. I also think that, look, again, I think people today have a lot of anxiety. If you have a lot of anxiety, then you tend to have control issues. So if you have control issues, what does that mean? You don't want to feel anything. You want things to move quick because you don't want to be settled. Right. A lot of times you don't want to laugh. That's another control issue. I'm just not going to laugh. I'm not going to laugh. This is not funny. I don't like, this is not funny, because you just aren't, you're trying to maintain some kind of control. And the truth of it is, you're not in control. You're not in control of shit. Okay. Like, you may think you are, but you're just not. So like, to me, it's like surrender, just surrender, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Surrender.
I agree.
It's going to be over anyway.
It's the people trying to figure out the magic trick while they're watching The Magician. It's like, just enjoy the magic trick.
Just enjoy, you're 100% right. Because if I read one more stupid thing where the person says, I figured the movie out from the very beginning. Oh, okay, well, good for you. Good for you. You didn't go for the ride. I knew we were going to Las Vegas all along. Okay, well, good for you. That's what it said. We're going from New York to Vegas. It's like, so you figured it out. It's like in a Hitchcock movie, is Yeah, you can figure out who the killer is. That's not the fun. Is I'm going for the ride.
There is, I mean, obviously we live in a society now that is breakneck, and our brains have been reprogrammed. We know this, to have an attention problem. But there's also in the zeitgeist the feeling of don't think something unless someone else has thought it first. That you are being, that's why they're called influencers, right? That there's this, somehow we've deemed a certain set of society to tell us how to think and feel and be. And if those people aren't thinking and feeling and being a certain way, then we just, as you say, stay in a stasis of some sort.
Well, you know what? I'm not a sheep. I don't need a sheep herder. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
I'm okay. I'll be a lone wolf. I'm fine with that. You know.
But then we have outlier. We have movies like Moonlight or Bottle Rocket or I don't know, Silkwood, which is still a pretty big movie, but still about a topic that isn't exactly a, feel good. There are movies that happen that do quite well, that have said, you know what, fuck you, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Well, look, I have to tell you, I think there's a massive hunger for it.
I do too. I agree.
I think there's more room for these kinds of films than people think, because look, again, if I were the guy spending hundreds of millions of dollars, I don't know if I would be so cavalier myself. I mean, it's very easy for me to not be spending money on making movies. So, what I would do is blah, blah, blah. I believe in my heart that there's a much bigger appetite for these films than studios are letting on. That's
I agree.
I do too, because I mean, how long can you watch the same old shit just because it's moving quickly? I don't know. To me, it's like putting a lot of sugar on a turd. I guess it's sweet. I guess, it's still like a turd to me somehow. But anyway. But again,
but if people are used to eating turds, then they're like, oh, I know this turd.
Well, I know this turd. You're 100% right. George Harrison said a great quote. And for those who don't know, he was the lead guitarist for a little band called the Beatles. He said, if you listen to garbage every day, how do you know when you've heard something good?
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah, I agree. Is it tricky? Because you work with a lot of seasoned actors, where they came up in an era of movies where things were at a pace, where you could be in the moment in real time, and now things are like go, 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 go. Is that tricky to direct them? Are they frustrated?
No, they love it. They love it. And I have to tell you, again, even with on Comeback Trail, a lot of times because most directors tell actors to hurry up. I'm always telling them to slow down. Even when we're doing Comeback Trail, slow down. Feel the moments. It's okay. When I was doing Vanquish, I said to Ruby Rose, because she was spitting out the lines, I said, Ruby, slow down. Just, it's okay. Slow down. She came over, she gave me a hug. She goes, I've been doing a lot of television. That's all they do is tell me to hurry up. I says, okay, but not everybody in this movie's on 80 cups of coffee. You know what I mean? Where, it's okay to have a conversation, like a normal fucking conversation, like you would have on a sofa with somebody. And I don't know. I feel, I had a rotten day. What? Long pause. Long pause makes you lean in. Silences make you lean in. Mm-hmm. Silences engage you. When things are going so fast, then I find you're not engaged. How can I keep up with it?
Silence is its own character. Sometimes.
Yes. Hello. Thank you. But again, if you have those control issues or attention deficit syndrome, the thing can never move fast enough. Mm-hmm. And the other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to smack everybody in the back of the head. Why are people on their goddamn phones during movies? Why are their heads down? What is this?
That's a major bummer. I love seeing movies in theaters, and it's amazing to me when you look around like, get off your phone, like there's a thing happening.
I know, and then they go, or they say it's boring because they're not engaging. But man, oh man,
we sound like really old people, I guess. But I'm with you. I'm long for. I've said this before on this show, is that to me, going to something like a concert or a movie or a play or anything or a reading, it's as much about watching this incredible performance in its intended format, but it's also about the communion of all the people in the audience that are taking it in.
Yes. It's just a form of distraction, and it's a form of not being engaged. And God forbid you start feeling something, if you, that's the point of this. I want to be moved. I want to laugh. I want to forget about me for a goddamn minute. I want to get drawn into something else. I mean, that's the joy of it, isn't it? You ever hear a piece of music, you start getting tears in your eyes? I mean, that's where you want to go with this stuff. That's the whole point of making it. For a guy who's been talking for the last half hour and won't shut up, I'm not normally like this. This is the most I've spoken all week. I'm not a narcissist. You know what I mean? That to me, that's all narcissism. I want to be overtaken. I want to hear about things I know nothing about. I freely admit that I know nothing. The older I get, the more I realize how much, when you're young, you think you know every goddamn thing. It's when you get old, you start realizing, I don't know shit.
That's
I
right.
just thought I knew stuff,
That's right. Yeah.
So I want to learn. I want to, and I think that keeps you young. I want to learn. I want to experience stuff. I want to, oh, really? No kidding. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that interesting? I never looked at life that way.
Right. It's an empathy meter. It draws you into another experience and reminds you of your own humanity. Yeah,
listen to you. That's great.
When you first started out, let's pick Bad Boys, for example. So here was a movie that featured two, Black leads at a time that was a little probably risky for studios. Was that tricky to say, this is what I see? Is that what you envisioned?
Well, as much as I would like to take credit for that, it was not written that way. Originally, it was written for one black guy and a white guy. The script sat around for quite a while. That script I wrote prior to Midnight Run, which I wrote Midnight Run in 80s. I was on kind of a roll. The first one I wrote that got made was called Wise Guys. That was Danny DeVito and Joe Piscopo that Brian De Palma directed. Right after that, I wrote Bad Boys, and I sold that to Paramount. That sat there for like 10 years. Then right on the heels of that, I wrote Midnight Run. Then that got made. That exploded. That changed my life. And then I wrote and directed a couple of movies. I wrote and directed 29th Street. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I do, yeah. To me, that's a great example of characters, of just like feeling everything. There's so much feeling in that. I don't know how to describe it exactly, but
God bless you. My wife had just said how terrific you are. Thank you. How come I don't know you better?
Well, we'll change all that.
Yeah. Come by the house and have a drink.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. That was a big, loving kind of New York punch in the face, comedy, drama, certainly. It had a lot of, it's loosely based on a true story, but I put a lot of my own experiences of growing up in an Italian family in that movie. Then Trapped in Paradise was like a big kind of commercial Christmas movie. And then Bad Boys got made after that. So that was quite a few years had gone by.
So you didn't make the decision to have...
No, they changed it up. But there were a few writers came on after me, which was really interesting. Every time, the interesting thing about Bad Boys to me was every time Don Simpson came back to me to do a rewrite on Bad Boys, I was always doing another movie. They first came back to me on 29th Street, and then they had two other actors, and then it fell apart. I mean, obviously, it was meant to be the way they made it, with Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. But then they called me. I was in Canada, saying, "Hey, you want to do a pass on Bad Boys for two African American leads?" And I says, "I'm in Canada. I'm making Trapped in Paradise." So they hired two other sets of writers. But then the movie came out and it was a huge hit. It was still the same basic idea.
Yeah. Is that a weird space when you first experienced? I'm sure by now, you've written so many movies and things happen with rewrites and things. But in the beginning, when you wrote something and then have other people come in and rewrite, is that the beginning? Was that weird?
Yeah, it was weird. And I've been very, very blessed in that it hasn't really happened to me other than that one time. Midnight Run, I was the sole writer. Wise Guys, I was the sole writer. So I started out that way. Mm. So I kind of established that. I got lucky. And I was tenacious. I would never I would never lay down. If the studio wanted more changes, I would do everything I could to make it happen. And I wasn't like, I have a lot of friends that are terrific writers. I mean, terrific writers. But they would say, I could say the F word. I think I said it once already.
Yeah, you can.
They would say fuck off to the studio long before I would. And as a result, didn't get as many movies made as I did. But, I always tried to keep my eye on the prize, which was, I always felt that if I left the movie, even though I might not always love the notes, I was still somewhat in control of its destiny. So it always seemed worth it for me to hang on. And then plus, I got called on to fix a lot of movies, a lot of scripts that I didn't get credit for, but I was always getting called, especially if somebody wanted kind of snappy dialogue or
yeah, your dialogue is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It comes from growing up in a very dysfunctional family.
Absolutely. When you made the transition into directing, how did that change your writing? Because now
That is a great question. It definitely changed my writing. When I wrote Midnight Run, see, I knew I was never going to direct it. So it's funny, from a screenwriting perspective, I always say this: if you're home in the coziness of your workspace, and you're not going to direct the movie, you don't mind writing things like, it's the coldest night ever, it's snowing, it's raining, it's pelting people so hard their flesh is coming off. People walk into rooms and it's freezing and steam is coming out of their mouths, or you're in the middle of the Mojave Desert and there's not a person in sight for 50 miles in every direction. They fall into a raging river and get swept up and blah, 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 blah. So when you start directing, you go, how the fuck am I going to shoot that? Or I'm not going out to the goddamn Mojave Desert in August. Are you nuts? So you start writing a little differently. It's when I wrote Midnight Run, like I say again, if you think about it, there's helicopter chases that lead to a big chase through a thing down a cliff. They fall into a raging river. I mean, I was just writing this shit because I was having a good time. And then Marty Brest, who directed the movie, I think fucking flawlessly, said to me, boy, you really threw a lot of shit in here. There's like, normally that stuff is in one, one of those scenes is in one movie. We had them all back to back, So now when I write stuff, I think if I write the word night, I go, is there any chance I could do this in the daytime? Because I hate being up at 4:00 in the morning trying to shoot because I'm just exhausted. Like, for instance, Trapped in Paradise, which I knew I was going to direct, I wrote, but I was also 34 years old when I wrote. Now I'm 65. So that's, Jesus Christ, 30 years ago. I was young and stupid. So writing a blizzard that all takes place in one night, as you remember that movie, all takes place in one night during the worst snowstorm of the year, I would never write that today. Or I would write it and give it to somebody else. Say, here, you go do this. I did this. I'm not doing it again. Yeah, so it does change your writing.
If you were to go back in time and change one of your films, is there something that stands out?
Yeah, these are great questions. Look, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I think that I'd like to change all of them, probably.
Yeah.
We
always
I think Midnight Run is pretty flawless, but I didn't direct that film. But all the ones that I've directed, every time I look at them, I like to trim something or, why did I go to that fucking angle for, or whatever, but all of them I look at, but you see, the problem is you can never, it's very funny when you make a movie. This happens a lot when you paint too. You'll know this as a painter. There are things that you won't accept in your own work that you'll completely accept in other people's work. Like a lot of times I will look at my movies and I go, they're taking too long in my mind, or they're getting too cutty, or blah, 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 blah. But if you're not emotionally attached to it in that it's yours, you can look at another movie and go, oh, I love that it's doing this, So I think there's that thing that happens. And I also think when you're looking at a movie that you can change, like your own movie, you look at it in a highly analytical way, which is important on the one hand because you're trying to make it work, whatever that means. But at the same time, it's a very negative way to watch the movie because you watch it so many times and you become so analytical during the process that you can start ruining what's right about it. And you sometimes just end up making it different and not better. So that happens, you're a painter. That happens when you're painting. Like you could go to a museum and look at another painting and go, man, that thing's terrific. If you did it, you'd say, I got to fix that eye. That thing sucks, But that's because you're being analytical. And the two things are always at work. I think when you're working as an artist, which is part of your brain is super analytical working on it. And then there's the whole emotional side that's creating it. And you got to learn to shut the analytical side off sometimes, which is a very hard thing to do because you got to go, I'm overanalyzing this. I'd never analyze anything the way I'm analyzing this. I mean, you don't eat a piece of pie and go, no, I think they use some paprika. No, I think they use cinnamon. I think there was a combination. I'm sorry. You just enjoy the fucking pie, right? So you don't pick everything to pieces that you're watching. You just enjoy it. So I would probably change all of them a little bit. There's actually one movie I did that I think is pretty. Yeah, I did a movie called Middlemen. I don't know if you ever saw that.
That's about I have not seen it. It's the one about the internet, people selling.
Yeah, that movie, I feel like I really got right. It's over the top where I want it to be. It's poignant where I want it to be. It moves just the way I wanted it to go. Good pace. It takes its time where it's supposed to. I'm really happy with that movie.
It's a Wolf of Wall Street. I watched the trailer. I haven't seen the movie of Middlemen's. And when I was watching the trailer in preparation to speak with you, I thought, Wolf of Wall Street definitely pulled from these concepts.
Look, I got to tell you, I can't speak for that, but there's another movie that won a lot of awards that the director, it's not Wolf of Wall Street, it's another movie. They pilfered that movie left and right. Middlemen was a movie that got the release of the movie was sort of screwed up in what happened at Paramount. I think they botched the release. Middlemen is a movie. It's really funny. I read a review. In a newspaper, the San Francisco newspaper, basically bashed the movie and said that it filled them with a tremendous amount of anxiety. And I was like, that was the fucking point.
That's what I was just going to say.
That was the point. It was supposed
like a compliment.
To be anxious. Yeah, I mean, I said, wow, yippee, it worked. It's like, you don't even realize that's because to me, it was that entire movie was like, like using a drug terminology or because all those people were on drugs, in the movie, they're all coked up and they're all porn stars and lunatics.
Sure.
It's like you're on a 3-day bender and an airplane flies over the house. And you're certain that airplane knows you're doing coke in your house. It was that kind of anxiety. It was these were very, very anxious, desperate people. So yes, of course, for 2 hours of watching that, it's going to make you feel anxious. We tried to make the cutting anxious. I told people to cross eye lines all the time, which is in filmmaking, you're always over the shoulder, right shoulder, the left shoulder. I purposely crossed eye lines. I did all these things on purpose so you would never quite feel settled or comfortable. But anyway, so it made him feel anxious. So,
whereas if that movie came out today, it would, of course, be lauded for that.
I would hope so. Well, listen, everything I've done, I tried to do a little bit different. I didn't look. There's men and women that have amazing careers who. They kind of keep making the same movie over and over and over again. And I've tried to make them all somewhat different, I definitely play around with the same themes a lot, but most of my themes are about some kind of redemption, these movies, which is probably sort of a Catholic idea going back to the beginning of the interview, but or certainly a religious notion of redeeming oneself for past sins. mean, certainly Middlemen is that, Midnight Run is that, 29th Street is
29th
that.
Street, yeah. It did that. To me, there's a feeling of even, which I think this is just a true statement, that in the horrors of just being a human being, it's weirdly hilarious.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, 100%.
You have to acknowledge that, that this is so awful. It almost crosses over into, or it does cross over.
Yes, look, we've all seen something so horrible. If you you're with somebody you love and trust, okay? And you're driving down the road, you see something so horrible, you quiet and you're mortified. And 10 seconds later, you could start getting the giggles. It was so awful, because it's, like Julie's father, Richard, told me the most horrible story. Don't out him, she said. He's passed. No, I'm going to tell the story. But he told a story about an accident that happened up on the Grapevine. What?
Julie's freaking out over there.
Well, I don't even know what story.
Well, let me tell the story.
No, don't incriminate him.
I'm not incriminating. All right. It would have been a loving story. Forget it.
I know what story it is.
Forget it. Okay, I'll tell you another story. I'm the world's biggest animal lover. Okay, leaving Julie's father out of it. I got permission from God. Okay. And I'm walking down. We're filming a movie called Local Color. Okay, we just finished the movie. And I was walking back to, we had a Winnebago. The Winnebago, we were driving from New Orleans to California. Me, Julie's cousin Brad, and the driver, Eddie. And we just had breakfast. We finished the movie. This story's awful, too. I'm walking back. You're already smiling. We're walking back from breakfast, but I'm about 200, 300 feet ahead of the other two guys. And I come across something, and I'm looking at it on the side of the road. It's like a residential street. And I'm like, what the fuck is that thing? And I'm looking at it, and it looks like a big piece of like black poster board, but it's cut out in the shape of a dog. And I'm looking at it, and then I realize it's got eyes and some teeth. And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, that was a dog.
Oh, God.
And it was so awful. I mean, obviously it'd been there forever, okay? And then, but it was like literally like an inch in height. There was every bug on earth had their day. And there was just this thing left. There were no bones, nothing, just a couple of canine teeth, and so like the remains of what looked like an eye. And I literally, it was so awful. I started getting the giggles. And I sat on the curb and I was like, it was, and I'm an animal lover. It was so horrible. And Julie's cousin walks by, Brett, he goes, what are you laughing at? I couldn't even talk. I just was pointing. And then he looked at it, he goes, what? And then he went, whoa, Jesus Christ. And then he started laughing, and then Eddie was laughing. So, like, that's a very long-winded way of saying I agree with you. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at people like Norman Lear or Mel Brooks, or who could take really dark concepts and find the humor in them. And whether they're poking fun and saying, it ironically, or if they're just shining the light.
Well, I mean, that to me is the genius of Mel Brooks. I think, you can't, again, when people start to get, let's say, perturbed about his subject matter,
Sure.
The reason it's funny is because he's poking just tremendous fun at a lot of human stupidity. Like
and horror. I mean,
horror, the stupidity of racism, the stupidity of, God bless Mel Brooks, that he could make a comedy about Adolf Hitler 20 years after the Holocaust. I mean, he didn't do it 100 years after. He did it in 1966, was it, or 67? The Holocaust was the end of 1945. So 22 years later, he's making Springtime for Hitler in Germany. Don't be stupid, be a smarty, come and join the Nazi party. I mean, man, that's
genius. Yeah.
That's guts and that's balls, and good for him, man.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
And it takes the power away.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think nuance is lost on a lot of people these days, which is an unfortunate thing with the pendulum swings, as we lose nuance. And
Yeah, and listen, I get all the outrage. I do. I just think, in the end, it's, all horror is one tick away from being funny.
Yeah, Key and Peele, some of their stuff, it's just genius. And like one of their sketch. Do you know Key and Peele's work?
No.
Oh God, they do a whole sketch where they're up on they're on the slave block, and all the people around them are being sold, and they're getting more and more pissed off that they're not being chosen. Like, what the hell's wrong with us? And it becomes this whole thing. It's such a genius sketch.
Wow.
About a horrific thing.
But it is also fun. That's very, yeah. I've also made the same joke too, being a Catholic, because I was an altar boy. And then, my wife asked me, were you ever molested? And I said, no, like I was pissed. And I was like, what, I wasn't good enough? That some priest didn't grab my thing? What the fuck? What am I, chopped liver? Yeah, I mean, so.
Right. Yeah. And maybe that's the trick, is that if within our own horrors, there is wiggle room. But once you step outside your own horrors into someone else's, that's where things get dicey, perhaps.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I'd be the last to understand how humans work.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, I do go back to the notion that art isn't supposed to be polite. It is supposed to smack us around a little bit.
Sure, I agree.
If people were politically correct during the Renaissance, we wouldn't have had the Sistine Chapel. We wouldn't have a lot of things. The real artist is always bucking against that stuff.
That's right. We wouldn't have the vibrator, for God's sakes.
That, what I think Mark Twain said that.
Definitely. The Comeback Trail, very exciting.
It is very, very exciting. The movie won 4 film festivals already. I know. And I won a couple Life Achievement Awards as a result of it. I'm very proud of it. It is definitely, getting back to that Mel Brooks idea, it is definitely a total throwback to laughing at everything. I mean, it's also got a very poignant story at the center of it, that holds it all together, because it really is a lot of it's about aging and feeling worthless, and then making a comeback from those things, feeling like your time has passed when it really hasn't.
So it has a meta level too, because you used actors, obviously, who in Hollywood terms, of course, have gone, are on the other side of their usefulness, for lack of a better word, which is ridiculous. I've never understood that, the ageism thing. The greatest thing in the whole world is the experience of living for art.
Yeah, I mean, we do celebrate youth a lot in this country, and youth is great in that, you have boundless energy and the whole world seems new. But there's nothing wrong with some wisdom.
Amen to that.
What is it? Youth and strength is fantastic, but it is no match for age and cunning and wisdom. So it's the great joke about the steer and the young. Yes, one of my favorites.
Yeah, so great. I love that one.
Can we say that joke?
Yeah, of course. Would you like to tell it?
You tell the joke. I'll mess it up.
So the steer and the younger bull are next to each other, and they're looking down over the field of all these cows. And the younger one looks up to the older one and says, "Let's run down this hill and fuck one of them cows." And the old steer looks at him and says, "Let's walk down and fuck all of them." Which I love that joke.
I think it's a great joke. It's a great joke. I know a lot of good jokes I can't tell on your show, but when you come over,
I'm happy to hear them all. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I could ask you a million questions, but I'll save it for cocktails.
All right, we'll do that. We'll do a part 2.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you
so much. You did a phenomenal job.
Oh, thank you.
Susan, I can't wait to meet you.
Right back at you. I'm very
looking
excited.
At your books. I want to see if I read any of the same books. What do you got back there?
So many books. So many books.
Is that Kermit?
No, this is a puppet. Yes, but it's not Kermit.
Oh.
He is green, however. All sorts of. I'm a big reader.
Are you?
I'm a fan of books. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I one point I think I read like every I must have read every sci-fi book ever written. I went through a whole period.
There's a whole section of Neil here, Neil Stevenson.
Wow. All right. We're definitely going to be buddies.
Yeah.
I can't wait for you never met my wife, Julie?
Not yet. No, I only know David so far.
Oh, wait a minute. How the hell do you know him?
We met at a party last week.
Wow. You're old friends. Okay.
Yeah, we just hit it off,
Oh, that's great. That's really fantastic. Well,
I've got to say that I keep saying this about Los Angeles. Every person I have been fortunate enough to meet, I feel like I've known for 1,000 years. It's great.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, God bless. Dave's terrific.
Have a wonderful afternoon. Enjoy your 4th of July.
I most certainly will. Hello.
Hi.
How are you? Can you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see you well. Thanks.
Okay.
How you doing?
I'm okay.
It's good to see you. You look great.
Oh, thank you. So do you.
Thanks. I'm in a new place from the last time we talked.
Is that right? It looks very pretty. The carpet's nice. And
thank you. Yeah.
There's a nice piece of artwork there on the.
Actually, my mother's college roommate drew that.
Really?
When last time I was at my parents' house, I was like, hey, guys, that's down in the basement. Nobody ever looks at that. Can I take it? And so they let me take it. Yeah. It's pretty fun. Anyway, enough about all that.
I don't know what we talked about last time or not. I'm sure I'm going to end up being redundant, but.
So we recorded, you had finished shooting the Comeback Trail.
Yes, it hasn't come out yet.
It still has not come out. So
no, it's impossible. It's so horrible what's going. Yeah, it's tied up in a lawsuit.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's an arbitration going on, and between the distributor and the producers, and I don't know what the outcome is. Yeah, it's just terrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
It's a terrific movie.
Yeah. I know y'all are really proud of it, and it is. I think it's something that people don't realize, that making the movie is just one of the multitudes of steps one takes in order to get a movie done and out. Yeah.
It's supposed to. In the meantime, I did 2 films that came out. You know.
Yeah, Ritual Killer.
Yeah, which is not. I was told. I think was the #1 video on demand for 2 weeks. Woo. Not bad.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That was a rough shoot in that I don't want to speak disparagingly. Let's put it this way. It was difficult because I'll just say it. I thought the script needed a tremendous amount of work, and so we changed it as we went. So we were juggling a lot of things while we were shooting, and I'm happy with the outcome. The people who get it will really get it, and the people who don't get it, it'll just fly over their head. You know, if you're a film buff, the way I am a film buff, I love movies and I love painting and music and literature. You know, what I wanted to do with that film was I wanted to model it in a way where the thrillers of today. To me, it's interesting because thrillers and they tend to be the movies where filmmakers stretch. You know, because you can do all kinds of really cool directorial things in a thriller that you can't really do in a comedy, because in a comedy, you're trying to just tell a story and make people laugh. And if you start getting too, let's say, precious with cinematic notions, you'll detract from the laughs, you know, because you'll get caught up in something else. And I watched so many thrillers, and I haven't really done one like this before. And I watched a bunch of them. And the ones that I seemed to gravitate more towards were the ones that were done in the 70s, because like William Friedkin's movies, they seemed far more believable to me and less, I don't know how to describe it, just less formulaic and tricky, you know, and tricked out directorial, you know, they're very simply told. So I said, well, you know what I'll do is I'll just tell this one like one of those movies, like a throwback to the 70s. I'll just be very in your face, very I can't find the word that I'm looking for. Almost like unpretentious, a very not self-conscious way of making the movie. Like, now I'll do this and I'll reflect this off of that. And, you know, so I just told it in a very sort of, in your face way. And people who know those movies really get what I did. And the people who don't know those movies won't get they just won't get it. They might think it's, I don't know. I don't know what they'll think, but it's definitely a throwback to a very specific kind of filmmaking.
I feel like that time, I talk about this a lot with my filmmaker friends, that there was a time when filmmakers allowed their audiences to rise to the occasion.
Yes, that is not the case today. I think audiences today, or not all of them, I don't mean to paint with one broad brush, but a lot of people seem to go online and trash movies. They always talk about how bored they are, and that it's boring, and that it's boring, and it's not moving quickly enough, and that it's boring, it's all they talk about. It's boring. I fell asleep after 5 minutes. I'm like, really? You are so exhausted as a human being that 5 minutes of a movie knocked you on your ass and made you go to sleep? I don't know if I believe that. But I do think there's I'm not one, when I watch a movie that I need to see 72 different angles of a person drinking a cup of coffee. To me, it's like, I don't understand all of that cutty stuff, unless you're making some sort of comment on that type of filmmaking,
I think it works in a movie like Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that made sense.
That movie in a lot of ways was all about style and all kind of, but not every movie lends itself to that kind of narrative. So, if you start covering other types of stories that way, it just might come off as ludicrous. At least that's how I saw this. That's the
issue of having to cater to the goldfish brain. Right? If you're catering to the goldfish brain, you are in the conundrum of creating the goldfish brain.
What does that mean? I've never heard that before.
The goldfish brain is the brain that needs a change of pace, or they say goldfish forget what they've seen or experienced about every 3 to 7 seconds. Like, oh, a castle. Oh, look, a castle. Oh my God, there's a castle here. That's the goldfish brain, right?
Oh my God.
And I think that unfortunately, we as a society we've allowed people to eat paste for so long, and the people who've been eating the paste have forgotten what steak tastes like. Apologies to vegans everywhere, but the metaphor stands is that there are certain filmmakers who are not afraid to serve a fine 8-course meal and say, do you remember when you used to take in and taste and smell and see and hear and feel the experience? It's a meditative process. We've forgotten what that feels like.
God bless you. Yeah. I don't watch movies to be distracted. I watch a film to go somewhere else.
Right.
And if that somewhere else is a soft, sweet, wonderful place that needs to take its time, in order to lure me in or hypnotize me in some way, then so be it. But I don't watch movies to be constantly stimulated and then constantly stimulated. If I'm not constantly stimulated, I start to get bored, and I just don't understand that. I always think to myself, how would these people go to a museum and look at paintings that are really standing still? Yeah. I could look at a great painting for an hour.
You're also a painter, and your work has a lot of depth. You, in my opinion, as somebody who has taken your work in, there are many levels to what's happening between the color and the light and the substance and the subject. There's a lot happening, and it does any kind of art form, I believe, a disservice to. Again, I go with the food metaphor. If you gobble down a 7-course meal in 30 seconds, what's the fucking point?
No, you're 100% right. Whether you appreciate the Jackson Pollock's work or not, Jackson Pollock said something really profound in that he said, in order to truly appreciate a painting or a piece of music or a piece of literature, a piece of art, whatever it is, photograph, movie, you have to find a way to leave your personal shit at the door, and you have to view it almost from the soul of a child and allow it to come in. Because if you're sitting there and you bring all your shit into the experience, then all you're doing is fighting it and fighting it and fighting it. And you're not letting it work you emotionally. You're just thinking and thinking and thinking, and you're trying to outthink it. And then you get angry at it, and then you get bored with it, because who can sustain that for 2 hours, where there's constant fighting. And I think, the fun of going to the movies, at least for me, this probably makes me sound like Father Time. When we were younger, prior to cell phones and the internet and all of this fucking nonsense that I just consider to be constant distractions, that you can't get out of your own head for 2 seconds, and you got to make sure if you're still relevant. And that's like a mental illness. That's if every 5 seconds you got to make sure that you're still on everyone's minds. The idea of going to the movies was to become a captive audience. It was to surrender to this thing and completely take it in. And then, having hopefully done that, you could make intelligent decisions and have intelligent discussions about what you just saw. Did it reach you? Did it sweep you away? Did it scare you? Did it make you think? But if you're constantly like this, give me more, give me more, you're not engaging with it. You have to meet all of these things halfway. Otherwise there's just no fucking point. Of all movies, I went with a friend. We went to see a James Bond movie. Those movies move pretty quickly. And this woman was sitting about 2 hours, and she was just constantly on the phone. And why did she go to the theater? She should have just sat in the lobby, right? And talked to her friends. Look, it's her life, but I don't understand it. It sort of depresses me.
Yeah, it is depressing. And we spoke about this the last time we talked, is that...
Did we?
Yeah, that movies...
Well, I haven't changed much in the last...
Well, no, that movies are it's a communion. It's a letting go. It's a vulnerability. We as viewers become vulnerable to the story that's being told to us. And also, as you pointed out, to be able to take our ego out of it. But at the same time, the whole time, we can touch ourselves through the lens of this other human. It's like this great lesson in humanity. When we walk out of a theater, oh my God, this writer felt things I've felt, or this director or this cinematographer, they saw the world the way I see it. What a beautiful communion that is.
Yes, and ultimately, I can't think of a better way to spend your time it's a shared experience. And you walk out feeling better about life, better about yourself. Which is
or worse. I saw the movie, the Irish movie, The Quiet Girl, in the theater when I was in Nashville, and at the end of that, it's such a beautiful movie. It'll make your heart fall out, but it's beautiful. And the thing about it is, having my heart fall out reminds me of what it feels like to be a human being on this planet. Yeah. And I sat and I cried for a good, 5-6 minutes.
God bless you.
And then I collected myself and I went out and I met my friend in the lobby who had to go to the bathroom to wipe her eyes. And we talked about that film for an hour or two afterward as we went on the rest of our evening. And that's, to me, such a gorgeous experience. That's why the Greeks believed that the gods were whispering in their ears,
God bless you. No, I mean it. I don't get to hear this that often. Good for you, pal. Good for you. Give me hope. People like you give me hope. Because sometimes I just think the human race is fucking done. And
it's up to people who create to lift them out of that. They don't have to just stare at shadows, like Plato. They don't have to they can actually experience the reality of their feelings and their experiences and all this stuff, even if it's in a conduit sense. And that goes for silly little comedies too, because sometimes we forget how to laugh.
Because you could say a lot making people laugh. What I'm stunned about, and I'm very hopeful when I hear you talk, when you even talk about Greek mythology, because I love all that stuff. I think all great storytelling goes back to that. Hollywood is in many ways is sort of a brain dead place. For a place that's supposed to be a manufacturer of entertainment. When you start talking about Icarus or Daedalus, and you could see they're glazed over. They don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I get like, okay, well, I can't help you if you don't, if you can't go back to the well, if you don't know where it all starts, you know what I mean?
I do know what you mean, but there is the hope. I think that if they have not drunk from that well, that whatever they're seeing or hearing or experiencing in the moment will then somehow spark that thing, that God moment in their own brain. And I don't mean God religious. I mean God.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. All of everything. That then will make them go, well, I wonder what that's about, and have them it elicit a desire to go deeper, not only in themselves but in the world.
Oh, good for you. God bless you, pal.
But I think they're out there. I think there are people.
Good. I'm looking forward to meeting them.
Tell me about the one thing we didn't talk about really the last time we chatted, and again, it's been 2 years, if you could believe it, that you paint, as I mentioned. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people with a creative, especially one who is as prolific as you are in a particular medium, right, as a filmmaker and a writer, that they think, oh, well, that's your lane. And here you are expressing and creating beautiful things in paintings. Did you experience any kind of pushback, like, oh, no, you can't be both things, or you can't be 7 things, you have to be...
Listen, I'm also a musician, I don't pay attention to that stuff. And it's funny in that it's interesting that a person it's interesting, maybe, perhaps, I don't know, that for me, that the word artist is not something that I would generally self-apply, but even though I write screenplays, I direct movies, I paint pictures, I play various musical instruments, I do. And I love doing it. I never thought the reasons why I do it, other than I really just love doing it, and I never saw any of this stuff as a way to make money. I mean, I'm not saying that everything I ever did, I didn't do a few jobs for money here and there. I did, certainly. But I don't know. I just always felt like I just did these things as I wanted to, and I had to. And I don't know exactly what it all means and why one does this. I mean, sometimes I think, you have to be pretty committed, to I'm always thinking about colors and paint application and design. I think of a lot, and playing one edge off another edge in a painting, and focal points and center of interests, and how do you tell the deepest story with just one image, and I have all these thoughts for paintings, like they'll just, I don't know where they come from, they'll come where something touches me and I don't know why. I did a painting a couple of years ago. I was walking on the beach down in Zuma Beach, and I walking, and it's beautiful, but it was late in the day, long shadows, and the seaweed, emerald green, mixed with the blue of the water. And I came upon these giant rocks, and there was a wedding going on. There was and maybe 6 people just by the water, and they were getting married. And I was like, wow, what an image this is. The sun was just blasting against these figures. And so I painted it, I did it from memory. I ran home and I started drawing all these pictures of, these figures on this big beach, and she was wearing a wedding gown and he was wearing a tuxedo. I mean, it was just fun. What does it mean? I don't know, but it touched me in some way, and I wanted to paint it. So I don't know, man. I just do these things because they mean something to me personally, and then hopefully they mean something to somebody else. I think the mistake you can make if you're an artist is that you start to dig a hole for yourself, and then you have to do these things for you first. And that's like the opposite of narcissism, if it makes any. Narcissism is doing something to be liked or to fill some hole in yourself. And that's non-ending. That never stops. If you're constantly singing for your supper to get some sort of emotional payoff, that is never enough. That to me is like a narcissistic thing. I can never get enough applause. I can never get enough love. And it's about me and me and me. And the opposite of that to me is I hate to use words like brave, because when it comes to the arts, I always think like the artist is brave. I'm like, no, a brave person is a person who volunteers to go into a burning building to save a child. That's brave. Okay, I don't know if I could do that, but I would say a more lonely approach is that you do it for you first, and if you're honest with yourself and you're honest in the way you do everything, then people will respond to it, and the more you learn to trust that thing where you're getting it, not like, what do you think? Am I any good? Will you love me another 10 minutes? If you're not doing it that way, but you're doing it for you first, then it's like a muscle that you start to strengthen, and when you're getting it, and when you have a good idea, and if somebody else doesn't get it, they don't fucking get it. It's like, that's okay. That's okay. I just, where I wish people were different, and human beings were different, is that they judge very harshly and say horribly mean things, but about people who are doing stuff. I think ultimately, if you're a creative person, a really creative person, you don't talk that way. Only a non-creative person could say, that's shit. Because the second you know what it's like to write something, the second you try to paint something, those are places you don't go anymore, because you appreciate when somebody else is doing something well, because you know how fucking hard it is, and even if you're really good at something, it's still hard. It doesn't get easier. Just because you had a good day yesterday doesn't mean shit today. When you're in for the long haul as an artist.
Something that you can't not do. That's the other thing of it. And maybe it's not even inside of you. Maybe it might be some sort of loop to the universe it's going through you and then back out again, and has little to do with you. You're just the one holding the paintbrush or the computer keyboard. But
I tend to think that, because I think that if you're doing it the right way, if you're not doing it the other way, which is you're in your head, but if you're doing it the right way, I don't know how to describe it. I feel very close to God. I feel like I'm in the best possible hands when I've stripped away all that bullshit, and you don't get to feel that way that often, except in the moment of creating something, in the moment of truly loving another person. But those are rare things, generally, you're trying to negotiate, and you're trying to get through life, and, but those moments where you're really still and you go, okay, I'm going to connect to this other thing, whatever that thing is, and try to say something in a language that in some ways hasn't even been spoken yet. You're trying to reach for something, and you're going deep inside, and that's like spiritual stuff, I think.
There is a universal language to truth with a capital T. I think when anyone experiences truth with a capital T in anything, they recognize it on a deep DNA level.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. And there's no bullshit in it, and how often does that happen? I may have said this quote last time, but one of my favorite quotes is from a guy named Robert Henry. Did we talk about this?
I don't think so.
Robert Henry wrote a book called The Art Spirit, and he was a teacher at the Art Students League in like probably in the early 1900s, and his students were some of like the greatest American painters of the 20th century. When you look at his list of students, it's like, Jesus Christ, the people that he inspired. And my favorite quote of his was, and he was a great painter himself. He said he never set out to do good work, but instead lived a life where good work would become inevitable. And I think that to me is a great way as an artist to live your life. It's like every day you're just kind of in that space, whether you're doing it or not. And you're always staying true. You're always staying true. You don't fill the brain up with bullshit. You keep that well clean. And that's the well you're dipping from. And if you think that way and you live that way, you kind of end up having to do good work. You can't not.
I think anytime you're creating something, getting out of one's own way, because the mind is a liar a lot of times.
The mind is a complete fucking liar, because the mind to me gets attached to ego. And once ego comes into anything, it just destroys everything. It destroys relationships. It certainly destroys art. I know people who they get stuck and they keep making the same mistakes decade after decade. I'm in my 60s now, okay? So I can say decade after decade, they just don't grow. They don't grow very much as artists. Their lives don't grow because they stay stuck.
Well, a curious mind will serve one until their last breath.
Yes. Don't take this the wrong way. I don't remember you being this smart. I mean, I hope you take that the right way. I had a lot of fun in the last interview, but this is like, man, oh man, you really think about this stuff, don't you?
I do. Thank you. It's very sweet of you to say.
No, I mean it. I meant it. I don't know if it came out the right way.
It's a huge compliment. I appreciate it.
No,
yeah.
I don't get to talk to many people who are like on this wavelength, because a lot of times when you have these deeper conversations, people get nervous and they disengage a lot. I notice. And
But they get nervous because they're afraid, as you pointed out, when you walk into a room, you're okay with not being the smartest person in the room. And I think people are really afraid to be looked at as not the smartest person in the room. But see, if you come in, again, that's ego. If you come in with that bubble around you, it's certainly going to limit your life on a lot of levels.
Yeah, because you'll never grow. How do you grow if you're not open?
I don't know. I think curiosity is a beautiful thing, and why would we limit ourselves and say, no, I don't want to know that today, or I don't want to be that today? Know as much as possible, be as much as possible. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of it. That was something that really stood out to me with your artwork when your lovely wife, Julie, started posting, when I started following her on Facebook, and she's a huge champion, obviously, of you, and she posts your paintings. And I thought what's really interesting about your work is that although it is a tangible image, it's usually a landscape and buildings and, cottages and pastoral, that kind of thing. But there's a mysticism to, I don't know what you do to those paintings, but they have like this thing that comes off of them that feels very mystical to me, at least.
That's very kind. I feel the same way about those places. I feel, I did a bunch of the ones that you're talking about, especially. I feel it's very interesting. A lot of things go through my mind when I'm painting, not as much when I'm writing, because the writing is more like I'm entertaining myself or I'm making myself laugh. The painting to me is a deeper place. A lot of those places that I paint that I have those feelings about are places that I visited as a child and went back to as an adult when I made the paintings. And when I'm making those paintings, a lot of thoughts go through my head, like how quick life goes by, how much has changed since the last time I've seen these places. I may never come back to these places again. I get very aware of my mortality, and it's a shame because I can't imagine the world without me in it. But but that was a joke. I feel like you say, mystical. I feel some sense of tremendous beauty and longing. And I feel a sense of gain and a sense of loss. Certainly, there's something melancholy about it to me, and I'm feeling those things. And I'm sure it's getting into the work. Like if I see some old barn in a field, I think about, man, that barn was built 180 years ago. The person that first built that frame was long gone. And who even knows who that person is? I mean, and they're in the ground and they're gone. And does their family know about this? And, but it's funny. I had those feelings even as a kid. And I guess obviously everyone's different. And some kids are more let's say in tune with something or attuned to something. I'll give you for instance, I have never told this to anybody that I can remember, but when I was a little kid, we were in a car, my parents and I, we were driving around in Washington, outside of Washington, D.C., in a suburb. And our car pulled up next to an old man because my father was lost and he wanted directions. And there was this old man standing on a corner, impeccably dressed. It was on a Sunday. And it was sort of a gray day, impeccably dressed with a hat, and a beautiful scarf. I remember like it was yesterday, and a beautiful raincoat. And obviously he was wearing a suit underneath, and you could see his perfectly pressed pants and shiny shoes. And he had such class about him. And my father asked him for directions, and he was very soft-spoken. It had to be I would say, like, certainly in his 80s, but like a super well-preserved 80s, like really beautifully, tremendous pride in this man, like nicely manicured nails. And he was talking with his hands. He was showing my dad the directions. And then we drove away. And I remember looking at him in the back of the car as a little kid, getting smaller and smaller around the street. And I never even told Julie this. And I knew I was never going to see that man again. I must have been like 6 or 7 years old. But I felt such a deep connection to that guy, and that early on as a kid, I started to see this. Again, it's not even explainable, but I saw this sort of bigger picture of life. And I was very emotionally impacted by these things. I could tell you lots of stories like that, and I try to put that in the work.
What you're describing to me and the feeling I get when I look at your work is a sense of brigadoon, that you have been gifted a moment and then trying to find that moment again.
Yeah.
Might be impossible.
Right. No, yeah, I know what you mean. There's places I want to go back to. Like, it's funny. There's this old broken down stone wall in upstate New York. It's probably those where they pile those stones on and they kind of go zigzaggy through hillsides and stuff. And I remember years ago, I'm in my late 60s now. And then I must have been early 20s. And I was lugging all this painting gear. When I was a stronger man, I could carry all that shit around. But I couldn't paint, So that's the sort of the tragic irony of youth. It's, you're filled with piss and vinegar and you can't really do it yet. And then you get older. Now it's more difficult for me to carry the gear because everything hurts. But I could paint the shit out of it now, I just have to get there and carry all the stuff. But I think about that wall once in a while that I sat on. I remember I was so fucking tired and I just sat on this wall with all this shit, tripod and bags of paint and the wind blowing this canvas around with some ugly, horrible thing I tried to paint. And I remember looking at this wall and I was like, oh no, there's a painting. Look how that thing zigzags up that hill, and it's like into these clouds. It almost looks like heaven, and there were some crows flying in the distance. And I was like, man, I could just capture that. Now that says something. And I think about it a lot. And I mean, I think about it once a week. I'd like to go back there. I just got to find it. I know it's off Route 18A, but I'll find it if I were to drive around up there. I'm sure I'd find it. But I think about things like that.
You are present in your life. That's the dysfortune of, yes, these handheld computers do a lot for us, but the one thing they can't do is see everything around it. We lose so much. We lose so much by being so self-absorbed, as you spoke of, being so connected to one's own ego instead of outside of oneself, and then just being so driven by this thing that keeps our eyes downward. How did you and Julie meet? I'm curious.
Julie and I met. You want the truth, or you want the?
Yeah, the truth.
We were drunk. No, I'm kidding. No, not at all. It was actually a very sweet way that we met. She was a waitress, and I was fucking broke. I had just come out to LA. I don't think I was in LA a week. And I was with a friend, and I was wondering how on earth I was going to become a filmmaker. You know, I was one of only 10 million people with the same idea, didn't know anybody. And I'm like, how am I going to crack this thing? How am I going to get in? The funny thing is, I felt confident always that I would, but I just wasn't sure how it was going to happen. And I was talking to my buddy, and I turned, and I just saw Julie come out of the kitchen with those blue eyes and that dark hair, carrying like 8 plates of food, like 4 on each arm. And I said, that's got to be the most amazing thing I've ever seen. That beautiful woman, I'm Italian, carrying all that food. That's the girl I'm going to marry. I said it to my friend. The second I saw her, I says, that's the girl I'm marrying. And he goes, you're fucking dopey. You've been out here 10 minutes, there's plenty of fish in the sea. And I was like, no, that's the one. I got a feeling about this, And so I asked her out, and, I remember I said, you're beautiful. And I said, I'm sure every guy in the world is hitting on you. So I'm like idiot number 523. I said, I don't even want your number. I said, here's my number. And I throw myself at the mercy of the court. And if you want to call me, you'll have a great time. And if you don't, she called. And I asked her why. She goes, you made me laugh. So,
that's everything.
And we've been together ever since.
What I admire about the way, from what I've been able to glean, obviously through social media and our conversations, is I think it's tricky for artists, for people with artist hearts, to feel the ability to get so vulnerable that they let someone else in completely. And you two seem to have each other's back so completely. It's a really lovely thing to see.
Yes, it took a long time to get there, because we were both, we were both incredibly feisty and very, very quick with our words towards each other. Obviously we were very attracted to each other very quickly, but Julie and I, if we could say things to each other that were quite like a nasty version of a Neil Simon play, what I mean? No, we could just, and she doesn't break, she'll just keep coming at you. And then I would too, oh really? We would fence that way, and when you're young, you're just stupid in a lot of ways, and you don't realize how good you have it. And I don't need this shit, And then over time, I think we really grew to understand that we really, really loved and respected the other person a lot. And that you can't fuck with, you know, it's too precious. So it took a while to get there.
How many years have you been married?
We've been together 40 years. She was like 18. I was 25. I robbed the cradle, that's for sure. And I married up. So we've been together 40 years. We lived together for quite a while. I'd say we lived together. She could tell you to the minute, you know, I'm not as good at this stuff as she is. She goes, oh no, it's really, she knows exactly everything. I would say we lived together about 8 or 9 years before we got married. Because a couple of people who we knew got married and then got divorced. And we were like, oh, fuck, they were so happy. What happened there? Maybe this marriage thing isn't such a good idea. But then we got married and we've been together the whole time.
I love it. I like hearing people's love stories.
Yeah. Yeah, ours is, we are very much alike in that we're very much homebodies. You know, like if she was a girl that wanted to run around and look at this and see the world and go to this party and talk to this asshole, I'm not that guy. I don't give a fuck. I'm not going there. Fuck that. I'm not doing it. And she doesn't want to either. Like when we get invited to something, we're like, oh shit, you know? So like COVID for us was the fucking best. You know, we didn't have to go anywhere. You know, we went to the supermarket, we cooked, stayed home. And we had a few friends over, you know, but generally that's what we like. You know, we don't like.
You're hunker downers.
We are. We don't like these big McGillas, you know. And,
yeah.
You know,
well, tell me what's coming for you artistically. What's in the shoot? I
have in the art world. I'm going to have a show. I was invited to have a show. I mean, I've been invited back to the Butler Institute to do a big show there because I had about 72 paintings. I had a big show there in 2015. They invited me back, but it's such a pain in the ass to frame and crate and ship like 100 paintings. And I paint big paintings. So that's a big pain. So locally, there's a great gentleman by the name of Rand Gladden who runs Photochem in Santa Monica. And it's a giant space. And it's where they process film. And that's where a lot of actors go to do voiceover work and stuff like that. So there's a lot of big movie stars walking in and out of that building. And Rand said, why don't you hang some of your artwork? Because it's such a giant, beautiful space. So I'm going to bring about a dozen big paintings there and I'm going to hang them there and there's going to be a little reception and stuff. And where are you physically?
I live in Santa Monica.
Santa Monica. Good. Then please, you're invited. Okay?
I mean, I am there. I can't wait.
Okay, great. So there's that. And then I've got 2 movies. I've got one gigantic movie that's supposed to go next January. I wrote the script with Nick Vallelonga. Nick wrote Green Book. It's about Carlo Gambino, the gangster, but it's told through the eyes of Jimmy Breslin, who was a newspaper reporter in New York, he won the Pulitzer Prize for writing stories about New York City street life. And he was a real street guy himself. He was one of these really tough kind of Irish brawler guys, you know, brilliant writer. And he wrote a piece about Carlo Gambino when Carlo died. And he basically stayed awake for 3 days, going door to door to door, piecing together the story of who this gangster was. And that's really the point of view of the movie. It's Jimmy going door to door. And then he gets told all these different stories about the rise of this gangster. So that's like a big, like $80 million movie that we're going to shoot in Italy and New York.
What's it called?
Gambino.
Oh, okay. Is De Niro in it?
De Niro will be in it, yes.
Yeah.
I have to talk to him about it. But yeah, I wrote a part for Morgan Freeman. We don't know who Carlo Gambino is yet, but Giancarlo Giannini is on board. Salvatore Esposito signed up. Who else is signed up? I'm hoping to hear today about Benicio del Toro. So it's going to be a beautiful cast.
That's a hell of a cast.
Yeah. And I'm hoping my friend Brendan Fraser will play Jimmy Breslin. He's I love Brendan. He's one of my dearest friends, and I wrote the part for him. So
please give him my congratulations. It couldn't
I
happen
will.
to a nicer human.
Yeah. No,
We're from the same part of the world, Pacific Northwest. I love the way Aronofsky ended that film because he could have made a lot of choices there, and I thought it was a really lovely way to end. But fuck, man, I gotta say the movies that are adapted from plays might be some of my most favorite because they're so insular. You never break out of this cocoon that they've allowed us into, and it just keeps you there so fully. What a film! Anyway, kudos to him.
Yeah, I will. I'll tell him. And then I'm doing, to continue babbling about myself, then there's this other thing that I also wrote with Nick Vallelonga, this big, just ridiculous, over-the-top comedy that I believe is happening. I'll know within a few days, but it's called The Big House. And it's sort of like Stir Crazy. It's these two guys end up in jail, totally innocent, and one is a Broadway choreographer, and the other one is a celebrity chef that used to be on the Food Network, and they both came on very hard times, and they're best friends, and they end up in jail for something they didn't do. And the warden, this is just like I say, it's a big comedy. It's like Nathan Lane. He's this like very artsy fartsy, let's say socially progressive warden. He's like, I've never seen a guy like this anymore. And he wants John Travolta to teach the men how to sing and dance, and they want to put on this big Broadway type show with all these prisoners. Yeah, John, I wrote it for John, and I want him to do it. And Martin Lawrence to play the celebrity chef, and he teaches the men how to cook. And what ends up happening is that the show gets so big that they're literally gonna open it out of the prison, and they get permission from the governor to do this big Christmas show. And some of the inmates want to use it to escape, and the other inmates are just there for the show. And during the course of the show, they fall in love with show business so much they start getting applause for the first time. They don't know whether or not they want to escape. They want to. So it's really like I said, it's called The Big House. The script is a riot. I literally, and I'm hoping that happens first, and then I can go do Gambino.
Oh, I love it. Those are great projects. You work with a lot of the same people over and over again.
Yes, they are suckers for gluttons for punishment. I love working. Look, when you work with somebody for a long time, and then it's like a marriage. You grow to trust them, and they grow to trust you, and it's just a good time. And if you're going to be, like you used to use the word vulnerable, when you're performing, you are vulnerable. If you're not, like Coppola said, they ever ask him. They asked him, "Is he ever scared?" And he says he's only scared when he's doing it right.
Yeah.
So, and you want to be able to try stuff and be scared, and
it's life is a high wire act over a pit of fire with alligators, right?
Listen to you.
But that's what makes it beautiful. And you mentioned Icarus, and all the while you're on the tightrope, you're knitting together your wings. You're hoping for the best.
Yes. Are you a Facebook friend with Julie?
I am.
Okay, good. All right. So then you guys talk.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Well, we should get together. Come on,
I would love that. What music do you play? Tell me about that really quickly, because we'd never discussed that before.
What kind of music do I play? I mean,
you're already better than I am. Do you ever play your songs in your movies?
I did once. A joke song I wrote. I was in Double Take in the Country Bar. I've written a lot of songs.
Oh my gosh. Do you ever perform?
No, never have. I mean, I do to the drunks here in the house.
Sure. When is your art show?
I don't know. I'm assuming in a couple of months.
It's fun to have shows.
It is, yeah. And as a general rule, I get very nervous when I see them. I feel both a sense of pride and excitement and nervousness about how they're going to get received, But
yeah. But to your point before, it's everybody gets to have their own experience with a thing. And that's that once you've created the thing, you have to let it go into the universe and be what it's going to be. I noticed the Jackson Pollock, because I had appreciated Jackson Pollock for who he was within the realm of art and history of art. But it wasn't until I saw Jackson Pollock up close and I saw the little bits of things, the cigarettes and the bottle caps and this, that. And I remember standing in the museum, staring at all these little pieces and thinking, like, I could see him painting and all the days that went by and what each little thing must have meant. And then what it meant to me. And again, we're reaching across decades and holding hands with the art. It's hard to explain.
I know what you mean. No, I know what you mean. I feel the same way. It's like, like Van Gogh is dead, but he's not with us. But when you look at those paintings, it's like he's still breathing. It's like his life is in those brushstrokes. I get choked up. I just get choked up.
Yeah.
We're a couple of softies.
I know. Have you seen that Doctor Who episode where they bring Van Gogh to his museum?
Yes, I did. And it's so beautiful in the ending. I'm like, God damn it, you're going to make me cry. All those people are standing around admiring his work. I saw it with Julie. We both got all choked up.
I've seen it 30 times. Every time I watch it, I cry. It's so beautiful.
And he can't believe that all those people are looking at his work in that museum. I know. Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
All right. Fuck you for making me cry.
George, you're lovely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
Please keep me in the loop of all the things. And if you
I will. And don't be a stranger, please. Let's communicate more, okay?
Yeah. If you ever want to get together and play songs at each other, you let me know.
All right. That sounds like a good time.
Have a lovely afternoon.
You too. God bless. All right, my friend.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.